We're talking today with Mr. Quincy Leslie. We are in Cascade, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University. Can you begin by telling us a little bit about your own background? Where were you born, for instance?
I was born in Northport, Michigan.
And is that where you grew up?
And I grew up, but I moved to Cheboygan, Michigan when I was in the 7th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I graduated from the Cheboygan High School. And
In what year?
1935.
Okay. Now, what did your family do?
My father was a telephone installer in the city of Cheboygan.
Okay.
And I was there with my mother and my brother and 2 sisters in Cheboygan.
Okay. Now, what did you do after you finished high school?
Well, after I finished high school, I attended County Normal, which is a teacher's training school, for 1 year. And that allowed me to teach in a rural one-room country school for 3 years.
Okay. And where did you teach?
I taught in the Cheboygan County in 2 different schools. And then after that, I was not able to teach anymore, so I was working for the Rittenhouse Rustic Furniture Company, which made the first type of rustic furniture that was put on the market.
Okay. Why did you stop teaching?
Because I was not able to, because of my college education. I did not go back to college until later on.
Okay, so you needed more education to stay on there.
That's right.
Okay, so you then were making furniture. Now, so were you basically doing, just actually making the furniture as a joiner or
Yes,
carpenter?
I was the manager of the shipping department.
Okay.
And I helped to manufacture the parts of the upholstered furniture as my part of the job.
Now, we're at this time, kind of late 30s up before Pearl Harbor. Were you paying much attention to what was going on in the world? Were you aware of what the Germans were doing and things like that?
Basically, I was, but I did not worry about it too much because I figured that probably I'd be taken in the service.
All right. And do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, oh yes, very much so. Yeah. But it was a small town, and they didn't pay too much attention to it. So it didn't bother me at the time.
Okay. Now, then when did you get drafted?
I was taken on the the words were
This was June of 42?
June of 42.
Okay. And how old were you when you were
I was
drafted?
24 years old.
Okay, so you're one of the old guys then. All right. Where did you go to once you were drafted?
Well, my final location was for where I was actually performing service was at Cape May, New Jersey. I have been in other locations, but my final place was Cape May, New Jersey, where I was a listed man as a staff sergeant operating a Seacoast SCR 296 radar unit.
Okay. Now I want to kind of back up a little bit because part of what we try to do is sort of cover the experience of training and the rest of that. So I want to kind of follow you as you went from place to place here. So where did you report to once you were drafted?
Once I was drafted, I took my oath in Fort Detroit, and then I was sent to camp in Battle Creek.
Okay, Fort Custer.
Fort Custer, and then I was classified as branch immaterial, and then I was sent down to Fort McClellan, Alabama for my basic training, and from there I was shipped to. They took me off a train that I was headed somewhere that I didn't know of, and sent me to the radar school. Myself and 5 other fellows. Okay.
Tell me, though, a little bit first about sort of basic training at Fort McClellan. What kind of experience was that for you?
It was just infantry training. I had to go through all the specifics of being an infantry soldier in the field, and learned how to fire the rifles and the machine guns and so on, and learned defense and offense methods of handling myself.
And then what about sort of learning drill and discipline and that kind of thing?
I was already pretty well trained in that because I had taken the ROTC.
Okay.
That's Michigan State college. It was a college then.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already gone through that period,
Okay.
so it was rather easy.
So that part was easy, and you were used to it. Okay. And then how did the drill sergeants conduct themselves?
Well, they were very kind to us. I had never received any words of reprimand from anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched the other soldiers, and there didn't seem to be. They were just very, they wanted things done immediately and right now,
Mm-hmm.
without question. And so that was the way we were trained,
Mm-hmm.
to be responsive,
Right.
according to what they wanted.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then you get sent off then to your radar school.
I was sent to radar school, right, and
Okay.
I was there for quite a long while. I don't remember exactly how long, but it was a complete course in training in electronics and knowing how to treat the situation when it came to confidentiality, because it was all top secret,
Mm-hmm.
and I was sworn to top secrecy. I made to understand that people came into the community and asked about my character before they
Mm-hmm.
gave me that classification. And therefore, and I was in charge of the station as a sergeant. My commanding officer, who was a lieutenant, I very seldom saw. I was in charge of that station 24 hours a day. And I had a crew of about 25 men who operated on a 24-hour basis, and we had a search out to sea 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to go back to the radar school experience here before Cape May. Where was the radar school? I think you mentioned that, but
Oh my, I don't remember now without looking at my Fort Monroe, Virginia, I think
All right.
it was.
yeah, okay, it's still there.
Yes,
And you were talking, and in radar school, you're learning. So you get basic electronics and so forth. You're working. Are you learning sort of the specific workings of the machinery?
that's right,
Okay.
of all the operation. And we were taught how to repair it.
Mhm.
I did have to repair one once, and had to go to New York City to get the parts myself. They were all top secret.
Okay. Now, were you trained on a variety of types of radar?
No, just the one specific type.
Okay. This is a land-based radar.
Right.
All right. And then so once then you've completed the course of training, then they send you to Cape May. Was that, or was that your last place?
That was my last place of radar service, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Now, was that in fact the first place you went after radar school?
Yes, that's the second place I went. I went to another location, but I was there only for an introduction to the unit from the standpoint of what it would actually do.
Okay. And then about when did you get to Cape May?
Oh, I just don't remember by date.
Do you think it was about a year after you'd
Oh, yes. all
enlisted,
of
or a year and a half?
Yeah,
Or?
it was all of a year.
Okay. So probably middle of 43 at that point. Now, describe a little bit how the station operated. And
Well, the station was a self-operating station from the standpoint of position. It was placed on the beach at Cape May, New Jersey, in a fenced-in area, so that no one could get in. There was a guard at the gate 24 hours a day, and we had a regular radar unit inside of a building. You would never suspect anything was there. And the outside area where the tower was just a four-legged, about 75-foot tower that you would suspect of being a water tank. And that was the operation in this unit. And then we had a operating electrical unit that would supply all our power in case of an emergency. And I was in charge of all that equipment and how to keep it operating.
okay. And how many men were working on the station?
About 25 men.
Okay. And what were you looking for?
We were looking for objects at sea that were suspicious as being enemy. When we would discover a spot on the oscilloscope, we could put a V under it, and it would tell how many yards out to sea that object was, and then we'd phone it to the Coast Artillery unit, which has 16-inch cannons, and they would prepare to identify the object and either destroy it or else determine it was friendly.
All right. Did you ever identify anything that they thought they had to shoot at?
Not to the best of my knowledge, we did one time, and that's the only time we ever phoned in one, but we never heard anything about it.
And would you have heard the 16-inch guns if they went off?
No, I don't think so, because the fort was quite a little ways away.
Okay. Now, at this period of time when you started, had the U-boat threat along the coast subsided? Was there?
It was just getting under control. But, I mean, we were controlling the waterfront so that any object that got into our radar that need to be identified, we would know about it.
Now, were you running the radar kind of 24 hours a day or just at night? Or?
No, it was 24 hours a day on the air. We had crews divided up. I think there was 8 men to a crew for 24 hours a day. I would be able to leave at night, but there was somebody there that was in charge while I was gone. And but I was there during the daytime, and we had changed the crew 3 times a day.
And so were you regularly picking up convoys and ships moving up and down the coast?
Well, no, not so much. I think it was pretty much a location where freights were, and cargo ships were coming in the area. It was at Norfolk, Virginia that we were looking at, I think, pretty much.
So you're at Cape May, you're sort of at the northern end of opening of Delaware Bay, but it's not that far down the coast from there to get to the beginning entrance for Chesapeake too. And so by and large the ships that went back and forth were not traveling in convoy?
No, not that we could see.
All right. And then you and your men basically lived on the self-contained base, or did you have barracks elsewhere?
They had their own bases to go to. Buses would come and pick them up and take them back to their base and then bring them when they were supposed to be on duty.
Okay. And then where were you staying?
I was staying in a private home on the boardwalk.
Okay.
It was right on a boardwalk.
All right. So what was that like?
Well, I didn't see anything because it was pretty much in the fall and the winter and spring of the year. I knew that 5 miles away there was a Marine training camp that they had their specific training there, but we never saw anything, real activity on the boardwalk as far as summer activity was concerned. And people didn't even suspect that we were there from the standpoint of actually wondering what it was, because we just see them walking up and down the boardwalk.
And were there people, did the people who own the house, were they there, or was it just...
Yes.
Just you?
Some of them lived in the northern part of the state, though, because they came down in the summertime.
Okay.
Yeah.
But was there anybody staying in the house with you while you were there?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I was living right with the people.
Okay. And they were feeding you? And
yes. I got my meals there and everything.
Well, it wasn't too bad a deal. Now, at this point, were you married yet? Or?
I was married. I had my wife with me, and we stayed in a little apartment there. She didn't even know what was going on, but we appreciated being together because we were just newly married.
Okay. And about how long do you think you were based in Cape May?
Almost a year. And then I asked to be entered into officer candidate school because there was an advertisement for officer candidate school, and it was for the Signal Corps, and I thought, well, that ought to be interesting. So I applied for it, and they accepted me, and so I went into training for officer Signal Corps right away, almost as soon as I got the application in.
Now, where did they send you for that?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I just don't remember.
Do you remember what kinds of things they were training you in?
They were training me in the basics of supply and of that nature, and of course we went through the regular field training that the other soldiers went through because we expected to be in the field. And when we were out, they sent us to a supply training school, and then we were sent to Texas where we were there for a while. Then I was sent overseas.
Okay, now as someone in the Signal Corps, would you have been a radio man, or what kind of work would you be doing?
No, we were usually placed in charge of a department that we didn't know too much about, except that we were supervisors.
Okay.
and each department had its own goal, and so we were not really knowledgeable about what we expected them to do, except to be sure that whatever we were asked to do was taken care of.
Mm-hmm. And so the idea was you could be sent to a variety of different
Right.
assignments, and
Right.
you just got the basics. Why would somebody in the Signal Corps be in charge of operating depots or things
Well,
like
it
that?
was Signal Corps administration.
Okay,
Signal Corps.
all right. And then where did they actually send you once you had done the training?
Well, I was in Texas for a while, getting other kinds of training for military supply,
Mm-hmm.
mostly mobility of military supply. And then I was sent to Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
where it was not a state yet, so I was considered as being overseas.
Right.
And I was placed in a regular office in
Mhm.
charge of a department, and I had a first lieutenant who became a captain while I was there, and
Mhm.
he was my supervisor, and all I had to do was just to be in the office and try to solve problems that came up to me from the clerks.
Okay.
Clerks who would handle a few problems, personal problems and things like
Mhm.
that. We just were there to be a kind of a supervisor.
All right. And what kind of work was this place you were at actually doing?
Well, it was administration of the actual movement and
Mhm.
acceptance of supplies.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there was a big warehouse there.
Mm-hmm.
And I never had to go at the warehouse. I just stayed right in the bookkeeping, kind of in like a bookkeeping department.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in Hawaii, then you don't have anything to do with radar station work or things like that?
No, I didn't have anything specifically to do with individual radar.
Okay. Now, what was it like living on Hawaii or Oahu at that period of time?
Well, it was very pleasurable because I
Mhm.
came from a cold climate.
Mm-hmm.
But I made a lot of friends over there,
Mhm.
and we were given time off specifically, and I went out and played golf and we would choose times to be able to go to a specific bathing beach or
Mm-hmm.
to a special thing of interest that we could enjoy, and so it seemed like it was paradise
Mhm.
almost.
Yeah, if you have to be in a war, that sounds like a pretty good way to do it. Did you bring your wife out to Hawaii with you?
No, we didn't. No, she had to go home. We had sent her home.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the time that I was released from the service, it was based on the fact that my wife had announced that she was going to have a child.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't say a word. They just let me be released from the service. I didn't apply for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't too long, and I was on my way back home.
Okay. Well, I would expect that this is early 1946 by the time that happens,
Yeah.
and by then they're winding down and they're sending a lot of men home anyway,
That's
so
right.
it may not have been too hard
Yeah.
to go and to do that. Now, when you're stationed in these various places and going through the different courses you went through, were you paying much attention at that point to the course of the war and what was going on, or were you mostly just worrying about your own
We
job?
were alerted every day to whatever was going on.
Mm-hmm.
We knew just exactly where the Germans were, and
Mm-hmm.
we knew what the Japanese were doing, or whoever we were concerned about.
Mhm.
But we were not given any enlightenment as to when to expect to be leaving
Mhm.
the service.
Mhm.
We were expected to just go on with our daily work.
Right. Okay. Now, while you were in there, did you feel like you were kind of making a contribution to the war effort, or were you wondering why you were there?
I was hoping so.
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping so because they were taking advantage of my education that I had prior to the time I went in the service.
Mm-hmm.
And I was happy that I was able to do something of that nature. And I was very grateful that I didn't have to be out in the field doing
Mhm.
something that the other soldiers had to do because they weren't as well educated as I was.
Mm-hmm. And do you think you got rooted in the directions you did because you had the education you did?
I think so.
Okay. But if you kind of look back over the experience, do you think that the time in the military had much effect on you as a person or how you saw things, or were you pretty much already grown up and knew who you were before you went in?
Well, I was indoctrinated fairly well because I worked for World War I veterans,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew what to expect. I was in the Drum and Bugle Corps for the American Legion as a drum captain
Mhm.
before I went in the service. And the day before I went in the service, I was playing drums for the Drum and Bugle Corps, the 4th of July parade. Just one of those kind of things.
Mhm.
But basically, I was fairly well settled down to what to expect. And my intent was, as a philosophy, was to help anybody else that needed help if I could help,
Mhm.
do anything to help them.
And did you get many opportunities to do that?
Oh yes, oh yeah. People, I never had to take a person in hand and give them treatment that I've heard has happened in the military service. I very kindly listened to their questions and
Mhm.
found out what I could do to make their answer be what they wanted it to be.
Mhm.
It was, and I didn't feel that as an officer I should be one that would just dictate something and then expect the answer to come out from there solving the problem, because if I could help solve the problem, that's what I wanted to have happen.
Mhm.
And that was my purpose in life.
Okay. And is that something you were able then to kind of continue once you got out of the military?
Oh yes, I went into my own business after I got out of the military.
Okay. And what business was that?
In the radio, television repair business.
Mhm.
When television first came on the market.
Mhm.
Then from there on, I kept on studying in college.
Mhm.
I went to college on weekends and finally ended my college career at Central Michigan University getting my degree.
Mhm.
And then I studied for my master's degree
Mhm.
and I received qualifications for that and got my degree. And then I went back into regular school teaching.
Mhm.
And I finished when I was 65.
Mhm.
I retired for a little while and decided that I should be able to be something more than just a retiree. So what I did is substitute.
Mhm.
And I substituted till I was about 72, 73, maybe 75 years old. I don't remember exactly those kinds of things because they just kind of pass you by.
Right. Now, what grade levels were you teaching when that was?
All the way through high school.
Mhm.
When I first started teaching, I could only teach the first 8 grades.
Mhm.
But after I had gotten my degree in
Mhm.
my master's, I was able to teach anywhere in the school system the first 12 grades.
Okay. And did you teach up in Cheboygan County?
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Yes, in the
Okay.
Cheboygan schools.
And how did you get along with the kids, and particularly in the later years or when you were subbing?
Well, it was very interesting. I was adult. My hair had turned gray.
Mhm.
And when I had to be a substitute, the first thing they wanted to know, were you ever a veteran?
Mhm.
I said, yes, I was. Can you tell us something about being a veteran? So I'd explain to them what I was doing, telling them how I could tell where enemy ships were or whatever were at sea by what my radar unit would do, and how I would call the station that was responsible for handling the situation after I had reported it to them. And they said, well, what is a 16-inch gun? Well, the 16-inch gun was their cannons they used to fire at the enemy, and I said that they would in some way destroy that object that they were looking for. And they wanted to know if I ever killed anybody, and I said, fortunately, I did not have to kill anybody. And those are the kinds of things that they were interested in at that particular time.
Okay. And so once they're asking you that kind of thing, then does that just sort of open things up and make it easier to actually go in and teach at that point?
Yes, it surely does.
Let's see. Now, at some point along the way, you wound up being mayor of Cheboygan. Was that right?
Oh yes, I became mayor.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Well, I was a veteran, and things were a little in an upheaval, and people were more sympathetic to the men coming back from the service. And I happened to offer my name, and I was accepted as a mayor for one term.
Okay, and when was that?
About 1954, I think it was. And I served one term, and then I was still considering other things, and so I also worked for the Department of Social Services on the board of directors as its chairman for about 15 years. And I've worked with the veterans organizations in various ways. I was on the Veterans Trust Fund for the state of Michigan for quite a number of years. And right now I'm working with the Veterans Counselor in Cheboygan County. I do a lot of counseling with him to help to help him to understand, because he was a new person coming into
Mhm.
the organization, and we conversed a lot, and so that we were pretty good friends and have good relationship.
Hmm. Now, in this Veterans Affairs work that you've done, have you kind of sort of what generations of men have you counseled? Have you talked to Vietnam
World
veterans?
War II veterans.
Okay, mostly World War II veterans.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. We considered whether they needed the help that they were asking for, and
Mhm.
we determined what we could do to help them if they didn't feel that they were getting all the help they needed, but we tried to give them everything that was available at the time.
hmm
Yeah.
And did you deal with men who sort of had what we would now call post-traumatic stress disorder, people who really had various kinds of...
No, that was handled by another method.
Hmm.
I was only a counselor from the standpoint of what we could do to help them.
Okay, see.
They would go broke, or they
Mhm.
needed food, or
Mhm.
they needed housing,
Hmm.
or things like that. We would have money available from the state
Hmm.
to give them the foundation in which they could get their help. From then on, it was up to them.
Hmm. And do you think the state did a reasonably good job of looking after them?
Well, at the time it was very well done, but as the veterans grew older, their problems grew greater.
Hmm.
And the problems increased from the standpoint of them being able to get to where they needed the help.
Hmm.
And it took a lot of volunteer service to drive them to locations where they could be hospitalized
Mhm.
or in any way helped. And one of the things that's going on in our community right now is to get a location that would make it possible for the local veterans to be given overnight service, we'll say, for instance,
Hmm.
not in a hospital, but in some kind of surveillance
Hmm.
to determine what their needs are.
Hmm.
And then they would be given the opportunity to enter a regular veterans hospital.
Hmm.
And that does help a little, but it isn't enough, really, because veterans, when you have war problems,
Hmm.
they never really mentally get back on
Hmm.
scale, so to speak, to
Hmm.
handle their affairs, because they have their own families, and they're not able to work in a regular job, and that makes it so that their problems become more difficult as they grow older.
Hmm.
And but we keep at it all the time, because I'm very fortunate. I never
Mhm.
got hurt,
Hmm.
and my health is good, and so I'm very grateful that I can be of help to them.
Hmm. Okay. Are there other things that kind of stick out in your mind about your period in the service, or some of the things you've done after it that grew out of that, that we haven't covered yet?
No, not particularly. I belong to a veterans organization, the American Legion. I've been
Mhm.
with them for years and years and
Mhm.
years. In fact, matters my 60th,
Mhm.
62nd year right now. And I work with, I've been for years, I've been the commander for American Legion to handle Memorial Day services.
Hmm.
And it seems like it's an ever expected job of communication to
Hmm.
be sure that the veterans organizations are all together and working to give the honors that are due.
Hmm.
And I enjoy doing that, and it's my privilege.
All right then. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Happy to do it.
Now, one of the things